strategy today with the World Schools debate format. And I know James talked to you, that was James, right?
Yes.
James talked to you about opposition strategy, and they have asked me to talk to you about more unusual approaches to argumentation that James may not have talked to you about. And I want to start by talking about three different kinds of arguments. And these are argument forms. You will obviously recognize them. I bet that you have used some of them already, but I just want to talk about them in a bit more detail. First argument form I want to talk about is the disadvantage. The disadvantage. The argument is that whatever the proposition team is proposing is going to cause something bad to happen. The opposition, the proposition advocacy, their proposal, or whatever it is going to cause something bad to happen. Now, I'm sure that you're aware that in a globalized world, things are attached to each other, and what affects one thing in one area affects others, and I'll just give you an example, right? China has started exporting an incredible amount of manufactured goods. Huge amount of manufactured goods. Well, they have to get this from somewhere. So what's happened is that the increased demand for the natural resources that make up these goods, and metals is a pretty good example, has really changed the market for metals in the world. Countries like Chile and Bolivia that have substantial metal deposits are now very important to China, and they have signed deals with them, and the result is that everybody else who used to make products out of metals as well now has to pay more for them. Okay? So that something happens in China, they make more products, it affects the countries in South America that have these metals, it affects those people that buy those metals. Right? So that's the basic concept, that what happens influences things all over, and it doesn't just have to be in a geopolitical sense. It can also be in the sense of humans. What happens to some people affects other people, etc. I sort of call this the web of life concept. The web of life concept. And now I'll try to use that metaphor to explain how you might be able to use this concept in opposition. The proposition team usually argues, okay, we need some change, we need to do something different, we need to have a different attitude, and then when they do that, they shake up the web of life, right? They shake the web of life. And it doesn't, maybe the whole web doesn't vibrate, but at some point, they pull on strands that connect to other things. And at some point, some of those strands are probably wrapped around someone's neck. Now, they may be far away and not observable, but to the extent that they pull on these strands of the web and it's around someone's neck, they're going to be damaged. Your job as an opposition team is to figure out whose neck is attached to the web that they're shaking. Who's going to be affected by this? And obviously you're looking for some kind of bad effect. I want to talk about the logical steps that exist in a disadvantage argument. And the first thing you have a name for it, just as you have a name for your major arguments, the independent arguments that you present in opposition. Most of you, I'm told in these debates, are not doing a very good job of naming your opposition arguments. They're called things like natural resources or political stability, and whatever name you give your argument generally needs to be a complete thought. Something leads to something. Something means something. Not a simple pair of words that are a noun. Political stability. No, the government case, the proposition case disrupts political stability. Right? It needs to be more of a complete thought than you're currently making. So that's the first one. The first component, it's got to have a good name. Second component is it needs a thesis. It needs a thesis. You need to be able to explain the entire argument in 2 sentences. You need to be able to explain the entire argument in 2 sentences. And this is the first thing you say after giving the name. Part 3, we call it the link. The link. What's the link between what the proposition team does and what your argument is? What's the link between them? Now we're going to go with a couple of arguments here in a minute just to refresh these, but there's a link. What do they shake the web of life, right? They shake the link. Then the next component, which you may or may not need depending on the argument, and we'll discuss that, is you may need to discuss brink or uniqueness. Brink or uniqueness. Oh my God! Anya's hearing something she didn't hear before. Okay? This is a cliff. This is you. Okay? These are sharp rocks. If you fall off this cliff, you're going to get hurt. That's bad. Okay? Now, if the wind is blowing hard, you're standing, let's say, 5 or 6 feet, it's not going to blow you off. It's not a danger. Right? It's not a strong enough force to blow you off. Aha! But let's say the wind becomes really, really strong. Right? Then you might fall off. See this? This is the brink. This is the brink. Okay? Now, it depends also on where you are. If you're balanced on the edge, like that, how strong does the wind have to be to knock you off? Probably less strong than if you're back here. Right? If you're bouncing like this, you're on the brink, you might fall off. Don't worry, I'm going to explain this in argumentative terms in just a minute. But this is a way that helps people. Now, if you are going to jump over and commit suicide, right, then it doesn't matter whether the wind's blowing or not. You're going to fall over. Right? Okay, now, what is the wind? The wind is the link. Okay? Whether you're going to jump over and fall off anyway is whether this whole argument process is unique or not. For example, a team could say that, well, if America adopts that policy, it'll make George Bush look stupid. Right? And the response would be, he's already stupid, right? He's so far stupid that it's not going to change anything. Okay? So, you know, that's going to, so what, that argument's kind of irrelevant. That's not a disadvantage, right? It might actually be good. I don't know. Okay? And this down here is the last part of the disadvantage I want to call the impact. Okay? So what we're saying is that, let's say the proposition team says, we're going to make a big win. Right? And you say, well, people who are standing near the cliff, near the edge of the cliff will get blown off and that'll be bad. Or if they're over here, away from the brink, you're going to make such a big wind that it will blow them off. Okay? Alright, let's think about this in terms of an argument. Alright, we have a government team, and they advocate sending a spaceship to Mars with human beings in it. It might be women, so I don't want to just say spaceship to Mars with human beings in it. Now, one of the things is that this is going to cost a lot of money, right? Okay? And so, money doesn't grow on trees, it's going to come from somewhere. Okay? And let's say that, and it might come from a number of different places. So the link would be cost money. Okay? The brink would be no spare money now. Okay? And then you would have what we call link. An internal link says they won't increase taxes. Why won't politicians increase taxes?
That's because people don't like it.
Yeah, they might lose the next election. Okay? Alright? Then you would have another internal link that says they'll cut programs for the poor. Why won't they cut programs for big corporations? Why won't they cut programs for middle and upper class people?
Lobbying.
Yeah, because they're powerful political constituencies. Poor people don't tend to vote. You know, they're not very politically active. Now, I'm talking about the U.S., okay? So please understand that I'm not talking about progressive countries. Okay? So if they cut programs for the poor, then you have the impact, right? The poor will be hurt. Now, it doesn't have to be the poor. It could be research for a cure for AIDS, right? It could be whatever government spends money on, okay? So here's a bad disadvantage is when you say, you know, sending a flight to Mars would cost a lot of money, so that's bad. So what, right? What's the bad impact of that? And for every disadvantage, you have to go to the end of the line and talk about why it's going to happen. Now, let's go back and look at our little guy here. Okay? Now, this guy is here. Right? In fact, he's so way back from the brink because the U.S. has a budget surplus. They have money coming out of their nose, right? In which case, this argument falls apart, right? But if money's very tight, he's over here. Alright? So if they have lots of money, it would take, let's say there's a $10 billion surplus. Well, there would have to be you know, if there was more than a $10 billion cost, $15 billion, right, for a flight to Mars, then that would be enough, right? You need a lot of link. When you are close to the brink of falling over, let's say the U.S. has a budget deficit already, right? No spare money, so they're right on the brink. So as soon as you spend more money on something else, they're going to cut programs for the poor, or to research AIDS, or whatever. Okay? But if they have a lot of money, you have to prove that this flight to Mars is going to cost a ton in order to move them off the edge. See what I mean? Okay? So I think if you think of it in this way, it makes a bit more sense. And what if they're already cutting programs for the poor? What if they don't have any? Like, my understanding is that there are some countries that don't really have social security programs for poor people. Do you know of any?
For low countries.
What's going on in Korea? What kind of social safety net is there in Korea? Do you know? What if your parents lost their jobs, you had no money at all? They were both handicapped. That was it. What would happen?
The government gives money to them so that they can have a basic level of life.
Okay, so they have a basic, right? Okay. So, right. I just wanted to, someone told me that there was no basic subsidy in Korea, and I found it hard to believe, so thank you for giving me correct information. Okay? So, this process, if you have a little link, if you're right on the edge, and they spend $1 billion, then they'll mean $1 billion cut from the poor, right? If they have $10 billion in surplus, but the flight to Mars can cost $15 billion, then $5 billion worth of money will be cut from the poor. You understand how that works? Helen?
But even in say a country like the United States, if they're already cutting programs for the poor, won't that just mean they're cutting more?
They'll cut them more, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So if they say, well, the poor are already, but they get something, right? So as long as there's something they can cut it. Yes, Tim.
But then this is reversible, because once you get the technology to come to Mars, they'll be the only country which has the technology, they'll get money back.
Right, so in the short term, the poor will be destroyed, and then in the long term, there'll be more money for anybody left. Yeah. Right? And that's very important. Like sometimes the costs of a program come in the short term, and the benefits of the program come in the long term. Right. Like you have to pay money first to go to Paragon Academy, then you get benefits. right? But the costs come first. Okay, so these are just some basic steps that you need to think about. And also, the exposure of the lack of this reasoning also is a way to answer this argument. So what I want to do now is to talk about several kinds of arguments that are like this, and you can look and see if these are related to any motion that you get. Okay, the first one is the one I just talked about. They spend a lot of money. It costs money. And you have to argue that, that things that are low priority will be cut, and low priority programs are more important than what you're spending money on. Right? You can't just say, you spend money and that's bad. You have to talk about what the impact of it would be. Why would that be bad? And that's the one we've just been illustrating. Okay? All right, second kind I want to talk about is backlash. Backlash. Okay? If you do something that people don't like, right, it makes them very unhappy, right, then they will do something bad. Okay? Just give you an example. The president of Slovenia was very concerned that some Roma, some uninformed people call them gypsies, people had been chased out of a village. And so he went there to make sure that they got to go back to their homes. The president was going to make sure that their rights were respected. Well, the villagers met them at the border of the village with guns. Yes, and they also chopped down trees across the road. Okay? So, they were backlashing, they were unhappy. They were very unhappy with this extended Roma family that existed in their community, so they're unhappy. Here's an example, okay, from the United States. Right? Some states have adopted laws to protect gay people from discrimination. Okay? And many people don't like gay people and don't want gay people to have rights. And there's documented evidence that indicates that when gays in these states received more rights, there were an increased number of hate crimes committed against gay people. Right? So they backlash against it. It makes them mad, and they do something. Okay? What's the link? You do something they don't like. They're already pretty upset about gay rights issues, right? So they look for ways to take out that frustration. That would be your internal link. They target gay people, they're mad at them because they got special rights, other people don't, and then the impact is hate crimes. Okay? Alright? That could be true about these. This argument generally is useful for things that are about values, about giving people rights, right? Because some people perceive that when these people get more rights, they get less rights, or they don't think they deserve it, or there's a hatred and a bad situation going on there. So there you have it. Okay? Backlash. Who won't like the proposal? And then how much will they not like it, and what will they do that's bad? Next one. Third category, political effects. Political effects. Often, what the motion will suggest is that some government should adopt some proposal. Like, for example, the UN is going to send an army to Darfur to stop the genocide there. Okay? Alright, now, this is going to have a number of political effects inside the United Nations. Right? Other people aren't going to like it. There's going to be a political effect there in the United Nations. Now, what do you think might happen? Speculate.
That some countries that don't support it will choose to ignore it, or
They won't participate. Or they might be so angry that they want a new Secretary General to get rid of our new Korean Secretary General. Or they might bring a motion to the Security Council to stop it, to cancel it. Right? And let's say that the EU has been totally campaigning for this UN force. Right? And so countries that don't like that are going to resent it and try to find some way to undermine EU's agenda on this or other issues. Now, which countries wouldn't like having military forces from the UN being sent to Sudan?
Sudan.
Sudan won't like it, there's a good one.
Dictatorships?
What?
Dictatorship?
Yeah, dictatorships. Can you think of one? I can think of one that's opposed to intervening in the domestic affairs of any nation anywhere. China. China. China is the #1 country in the world for defending national sovereignty, right? The right of a state to control what happens inside of it for obvious
Because
reasons.
they don't want people getting in there.
Right, they don't want anyone getting in their business. Exactly, and that's their response when people complain about Chinese human rights or whatever. Okay? All right, now, let's look at this a different way. Let's say that the motion is that the United States should attack Iran and wipe out its nuclear facilities. Okay? Iran's going to get nuclear weapons, that's bad. They were just arguing this motion a few weeks ago. Right? A nuclear strike, take out Iranian nuclear facilities. Okay? Now, what kind of political effects would that have inside the U.S.?
Another disagreement about starting a...
What? Another war? We already got one. We don't need two. Yeah, so what? People are upset?
Well, polarizing.
Polarizing? Oh no. Right now there are red states and blue states, right?
People will be upset and start doing bad things.
America's already polarized. Okay, so that would be not unique. It's going to, polarizations happen anyway. What else?
This is within the United States? Protests against the government.
Anti-American sentiment increase.
Anti-government, okay, big deal. Bush already has the lowest popularity of any president in the 20th century, or the 21st.
It could bring impeachment motions.
It could bring impeachment motions, okay? Now, is there already a movement to impeach Bush in the U.S.?
It's not as strong as it would be if this would happen.
Is it close to the...
Right.
Yes, it is, right? It is close to the brink, all right? And so, one more thing, and a lot of people might go, that's it, I've had it with this guy, we're going to impeach him. Right? Now, why would that be bad?
Brings political instability to a country when you have leaders changing like that, changing outside of the normal
Okay?
rotation.
That would be one. What other impacts would you have?
Cheney would take over.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm looking for. Then you have Cheney who says, well, let's invade other countries while we're at it.
Cheney says,
Right?
how about I shoot my lawyer again?
Right. Also, what happened when, what happened to the process of government in America when they were trying to impeach Clinton?
It stalled.
Yeah, it stalled. Absolutely. So all kinds of government initiatives would not happen. The government would be stagnated. And, if you knew, there's no substitute for knowledge, right? And if there's, like a biomedical research bill that's waiting, that has to be delayed. If there's funding for important programs, that has to be delayed while they fight out about impeachment, right? So you have to think all the way. If I jump down here and land on a bunch of, oh, we get rid of Bush, great, super.
But
And then I land on soft pillows, fragrantly scented with lavender, right? Then that's not an impact, right? So political instability. Now, generally, the argument goes like this: government does X, people don't like X. That government becomes unpopular and can't implement their agenda, and their agenda is good. Okay? I don't know if that works with Yansha or not, but all right, do you understand that? That there's political instability. Now, if it was about the EU, let's think about agricultural subsidies of the EU. Are agricultural subsidies more important to some countries? You debated this, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is it more important to some EU countries than others?
Yes.
Yes. Which ones are most important?
The
France.
new joiners.
What?
The
New joiners?
New joins France, Ireland also.
France can be independent. It just wants money for itself. This gets woman.
Well, your editorial is welcome, but not necessarily relevant. Okay. Now, what happens if you cut agricultural subsidies? These new countries are going to be really ticked off, right? Now, why does France really care about agricultural subsidies? No, but they have lots of farmers that do. And farmers in France have a record of they will take their trucks and tractors and park them in the middle of the highway. They'll stop the commuters from getting to work in Paris. They'll try to cripple the whole country in defense of agricultural subsidies, right? So this is an example of where there are political effects, right? And there will be political effects on the EU, right? And it will create a division. Yeah, but why is that so bad? Why is it so bad that some countries in the EU are really angry, the new countries in France not? So what? Anger, bad.
Yeah, but it stops the whole work in the EU.
Because-
We're only being discussing whether or not we are going to do that, because everything in the European Union takes years to fix.
No, because every country needs to agree with every motion, and if
Yeah.
the countries are against, then nothing will be passed.
Right, then nothing will be passed. Ireland and France and Poland will say, no agricultural subsidies, we're not agreeing to anything. We're going to hold everything else hostage. And when that happens, the whole EU is likely to collapse. Because it requires all countries to agree. And if a few countries hold out, right, because agricultural subsidies are so important to them. Now, why would somebody do you know who's running Poland?
The brothers.
The twins.
They know their name?
Something starting with W. I forgot.
Yes, they're twin brothers. One's the prime minister, the other's the president.
Yeah.
I think there's actually only one of them, but they never do the same. Now, why would they make such a big stink in Brussels or Strasbourg, depending on which day it is? Why do they make such a big stink? Why would they cripple the EU and threaten, we're not going to vote for anything until you give us...
For first, because they'll get a reason. I mean, even now they're pro-American. For firstly, and now they'll even get a reason to do that, and they will not get enough money that they would to make the agriculture on the same level as the other.
Also, millions and millions of farmers are going to vote against them whenever they have a chance, right? It'll be an issue against them. Remember, politicians respond to public opinion. You have to remember that. They're not just willing to say, screw you to the voters, because they have to go to them to be reelected. Right? It's not like in some countries where you can only be there once.
Unless it's the second term of the presidency.
Unless
Then they
it's
just,
the
then they just don't.
Then they don't care, right? Which is exactly where we're at now. Okay? So, there we go. Political effects. International effects. International effects is next. Right? You'll make some countries unhappy, and that's bad. Okay? You will make some other countries unhappy. And you could talk about this in terms of Darfur if you want as well. Right? China would be boiled over. Why is China concerned about Sudan?
Because they want to set a model of not interfering with other people's policies.
Yeah, that's one reason. But, what's that?
Buy their guns from those?
Well, yeah, Sudan
Yeah,
gets
China
weapons.
also has.
I was just going to say the same thing about the trade between them.
Yeah, okay, in parts of Sudan they have huge oil fields. They've been developed by the Chinese. The Chinese have signed the contracts. And you know that there are 11,000 Chinese soldiers in the Sudan guarding those oil fields? You don't hear that much in the news, but it's true, right? They're like security guards protecting, okay, the oil fields. That's very important to them, okay? And, there are a lot, and, China's a big country. And China's pretty important for, forming any kind of consensus as to what should happen in the world. So there'll be international effects. Let's say that the government team says, okay, let's invade Iran and knock out their nuclear facilities. Right? Can you think of any international effects that might be caused by that? Go.
Neighboring countries do worry about spillover?
Yeah, we're next, yeah. Yeah, spillover of radiation perhaps, because we probably have to use tactical nuclear weapons to take out the buried nuclear facilities, okay? Neighboring countries?
Would it have a chain reaction if you blew up a nuclear weapon with a nuclear weapon?
No.
They wouldn't set it off?
No, you might have a cloud of poisonous dust.
Yeah,
But
but that would spread.
That's why they're talking about using these bombs that burrow down in the ground before they explode. That's why they get to the buried bunker and then they blow up. It ruins the camera shot in the front that we enjoyed so much during the first Gulf War. Oh, you were too young for that. They took that off. All these precision-guided munitions had cameras in the front. And, you know, you guys probably weren't there to remember this, but on the news every night they would show the camera shots from some, you know, they take out a bridge. People are running across the bridge. You see people turning around and going, whoa, and then, right? It's like, yeah, they actually showed that on TV. And they decided that this was bad publicity. So now they don't show this anymore. I bet the soldiers still watch them though. Okay? International effects. Let's say yes.
An unstable government after we take out Ahmadinejad.
Yeah, who knows who will be the replacement? Yes. You 5 minutes?
No, I'm just imagining.
Yeah, okay.
And even if you take them out, I mean, they still have to do the technology to redevelop them and make it again.
Yeah. Okay, so you get the idea. Other countries will be unhappy. Now, when countries like each other and cooperate, things go well, right? And so what you would have is probably a group of countries that don't want to take out Iran's nuclear facilities, Arabic countries, Muslim countries, China, and then countries who wouldn't mind. The UK, US, and various associated US puppet regimes, like the ones that welcome the anti-ballistic missile systems in Europe. Poland, yeah, Romania, and Bulgaria. Okay, Kazakhstan. Okay, so international effects. Next, distortion of markets. Distortion of markets. Right? I'm sure you're all familiar with the concept of free market economics. That if you just leave it alone, the market will take care of it. Right? The invisible hand of Adam Smith. Right? Just let it handle and prices will be at the right level so that people will buy as much as they can and everything will be fine. And to a large degree, the world has moved towards, these movement towards economic liberalization. Basically, it's removing a lot of regulations on industry and the international business climate so that they can pursue profit, so that hopefully all of us will benefit. That's the theory behind free market capitalism. And if you need a lesson in how that works, read any edition of The Economist. They're totally addicted to this liberalizing, free trade, free market, stop government regulation, leave business alone and they'll do the best. Okay? Now, often the proposition will come in and say, no, industry and business are doing bad things, we have to control them. We have to control them. Right? We're going to have new controls on them. Okay? And according to the theory of market economics, this will create inefficiencies, it will create loss of revenue, loss of jobs, right? And it's not just the direct effect, it's also a perceptual effect. And to the extent that this is true, I want to mention investment, right? Investment, if you're going to invest billions of dollars, you need to know what the regulatory climate is going to be like, right? Or is there going to be, I feel confident that there's not going to be a lot of regulation, so I am going to invest billions of dollars, okay? But if all of a sudden, and this is called investor confidence, all of a sudden there are big new regulations on business, investors hold their money back because they want to see what's happening. And this is really true for countries that are becoming more dependent on outside investment. Rapidly developing countries like China needs outside investment, India needs outside investment. Most so-called third world countries also are trying to get a lot of outside investment. Okay? And if all of a sudden there's regulations on business, the investors will hold back. Because they don't want to invest the money and then find that there's regulations. Get adopted. Okay? So they perceive investor confidence will be hurt. And there's a very famous quotation, I think, that every debater should know. The guy's name is George Meade, and you can look him up. You can use this more than once. And he says that if economic confidence is damaged, that the world could easily spin into a depression, which would result in a war. Okay? George Herbert Meade, I think is his name, M-E-A-D. Okay? And, you know, I mean, we're not all about reading quotations, but that's a pretty good one at some point, right? Investor confidence is hurt. Then that's the engine that keeps the world economy going. And if the world economy goes down, it's not going to be like previously where like one country would have an economic downturn. His argument is now that because they're all so linked together, if major countries go down, right, the whole world will go down, and that will lead to war. Another quotation that I think is very good, and I don't know who it's from, but it's a really good one. If goods don't cross borders, troops will. If goods don't cross borders, troops will. What's the logic behind that?
We could trade with those rights.
Yeah. You don't shoot your customers. Right? But if they're no longer your customers and you don't need them and they're not dealing with you, maybe you'll try to take what they have. And that's the logic. Okay? Next, harm to specific individuals. Specific individuals or groups of individuals. All right? I'll just give you an example now. You got to figure out who is going to be affected by this in a bad way, how will they be affected, and why will that be overall bad. Okay? Here's an example. Okay? Now you know that the United States does not have universal health coverage. Okay? We are a completely uncivilized country in this regard. Taiwan and Slovenia can do it, as Michael Moore's recent movie points out, but the United States can't. Okay? Now, so we should have universal health coverage in the United States. Now, which group of people will be directly affected by a government takeover of the healthcare sector?
The ones that cannot
The
afford
HMOs.
health.
Well, they'll be affected good, right? Great, I can get Medicare.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what's the disadvantage? What's bad?
The
Yes?
HMOs.
The current medical health maintenance organizations, yeah? Who else?
The taxpayers?
Well, they'll have to pay. I was thinking about, and here I'm looking for a more targeted group. Right? Doctors and nurses. Okay? Doctors and nurses all of a sudden become public employees. Now, currently, if you're a doctor in the US, you make a ton of money. You make lots and lots and lots of money. But if you become a government employee, you'll not. Right? You'll make a fraction of what you were making before. And there's a considerable group of doctors and nurses between the ages of 45 and 65 who have said that they will instantly retire. If the U.S. switches to, universal health coverage along like a Canadian model, that they would retire. So, you have like 30% of doctors and nurses retire. What does that do for the healthcare system? Yeah, it cripples it, totally. Right? And so you're looking for a specific group of people who are really attached to this, okay? Now, trial lawyers, doctors, professionals, scientists, all kinds of people like this, okay? And that they will be harmed specifically, and that will have incredible effects on others, okay? Next. Evil uses of the proposal. Evil uses of the proposal. Okay? A lot of times when proposals are vague, they can be misused. Right? Like in the UK now, they have laws that say that you can arrest someone for suspicion of terrorism, and you can hold them for weeks without charging them, and they don't have to see a judge or anything. Okay? Now, if you were an evil politician, you could use this proposal by locking up people, and you don't have to give a
Or locking up your opponents.
lock up, whatever. I mean, it's been done. I mean, if you're following events in Bangladesh, and you should be. Right? The current government has now arrested the leaders of all the other parties, claiming that they're a threat to national security. Okay? So you could do that kind of stuff. George Bush just signed an executive order that says, that gives him the power to take possession of any property owned by anyone who is disruptive of the stabilization efforts in Iraq. This was just signed last week, and the news media is not reporting it. Right? Get that? He could take any property owned by anyone who's being disruptive of the stabilization efforts in Iraq. Look out, Cindy Sheehan. You know who she is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's the mother whose son was killed and has been campaigning. She bought a piece of property.
She sold it.
Yeah, I know. She had a piece of property right next to it. Maybe she knew this was coming. Right? And so anti-war groups, right, who are obviously operating against stabilization efforts, you know, this kind of stuff could be used against them. Yes?
How does he pass something like that? I mean, it seems so obviously wrong.
It's executive.
It's executive order. They have to wait, and somebody has to file suit and take it to court, and then I'm sure the courts will say, no. But in the short term, he gets away with it. And there's no publicity. No one knows.
Is
It's
it only property in Iraq that they can do?
No, property in the U.S.
Oh, okay.
Anywhere within the jurisdiction of the United States.
So if I go on TV and like go from saying that the war is
Say,
horrible,
no war. And then, you know, your house gets taken away. Or they
If
tow
you're
your car and you
harassing
can't
as
have it.
much as Cindy Sheehan, you're
Right?
in trouble.
Yeah, so I mean, we're just going out of this there. Now, you may say that George Bush wouldn't do that. I don't know. But, you know, other leaders might. Dick Cheney might. Right, yes.
Would that law still be in effect when the next president comes to power?
Unless he signs executive order getting rid of it. But then, of course, if the new president, you're not forced to use it. So, remember, the president enforces the laws. So, okay? So, evil uses of the proposal. What are you looking for? Is it vague? Could it be used for political purposes? Right? Could it be used to aid one group over another? Finally, I want to talk about bad precedent. Bad precedent. And for bad precedent, we encounter the famous slippery slope argument. Okay? Are you guys familiar with the slippery slope? Yes? Okay. Some people I know are. How about you, Vern? Are you familiar with the slippery slope? All right. Explain to me the slippery slope argument against legalizing euthanasia.
You basically
Go.
It could then lead to the euthanization of people who the government considers to be
Threat to national security.
threats, or maybe I'm taking it the wrong way. It could lead to the sterilization of people who, like inmates, or sterilization.
Okay. Go. Helen.
If you
You're on the
allow,
right track.
if you allow people to help others kill themselves,
Uh-huh.
well, basically you're allowing that to take place, and this can lead to, well, basically, it can lead to saying, you know, if you kill somebody, you can say, but they wanted me to do it, it was euthanasia, and thus continuing the political process.
Yes. Go.
Oh, well, there's a potential abuse of the mechanism. Like, for example, there's an old lady, lots of money, if relatives can kill her off, there's no one to,
Get rid of her.
yeah,
We want the money.
yeah, the lawyers can put it back on her. It's just no one to monitor it, and you set that precedence in terms of you do not value life.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Once you say that, you know, we can take life for a purpose, then it can be used in other instances, like, what about severely deformed children? Right? Shouldn't we euthanize them? What about, you know, people who have Alzheimer's disease, right? And can't think anymore and don't know where they are and don't remember their names, right? We could do that to them, right? Okay? So this is this slippery slope. Once we start going down that road, right, of taking life for some other purpose, then we'll do it again and again. And the argument is that you start, and then the next one is easier, and the next one is easy. And it's not a break, it's a slope. And it's really slippery. And once you get on it, you slide to the bottom. Right? And before you know it, 15 years from now, people below a certain income level are being euthanized or whatever, right? Children who are not very smart. And imagine how hard you'd work in school if you were going to be executed if you didn't do well. Well, some of you are already experiencing that, I think. But, you know, so this is this slippery slope, all right? What's wrong with that slippery slope? Argument. Yes?
It's based on a bunch of assumptions, and as you go down it, the probability of the end result just gets less likely.
Yeah, but if it's slippery.
You have to prove the link between each one, and that can be difficult. Because if you say that, you know, just saying that we don't value life of people who are going to die, that's very different than saying we don't value the life of people who aren't of help to society.
Yeah. Yes, they're not the same, you could argue. Go ahead.
But I think the main issue with euthanasia is always consent. If the government side comes up and says, okay, we're going to do that, every single protocol existence, there's going to be consent. The opposition side kind of just say, okay, we're going to assess.
I know I did poorly on my homework, but I don't consent to be euthanized. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let me tell you the best generic answer. Right? Is that we're already on that slope. Has American society already decided that they can take life for some reason? Yeah, they have capital punishment. So why aren't we already sliding down that slope? If it's so slippery, we should already be sliding down. We should be halfway down. Right? See what I mean? It's not happening now. Right? So anytime you hear this slippery slope argument, if you could think of, wait a minute, we're already on that slope, and we're not sliding anywhere. So the theory, the theory behind the argument is false.
But is it proposed, like, basically, is it sort of saying that, like, yes, we're on the slope, and now we're taking the next step down it?
Yeah, but if it's so slippery, once we're on it, we're already going down. Right? You can't get on a slide that's covered with beef fat, right, and stop halfway down. Right? That's the whole argument. And if there's no beef fat on it and you don't slide, if you can stop, then the whole argument doesn't work, right? Oh, we'll just stop with euthanizing terminally ill people. Okay? So, very rarely will they say slippery slope. If they do, immediately you know how to deal with it. But it's a very popular argument. All right, type of argument number 2. I'm going to talk about the critique. The critique. Yeah, the first type was disadvantage. And the second type is the critique. Right? The critique claims that the assumptions and ideas advanced by the proposition team are false, evil, or both. Assumptions. Assumptions. Now, this is a very popular. Sometimes when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. Ask me. Hello, my name is Ask me. Okay? So what you're saying here is that the assumptions behind what they're talking about, they're false, evil, or both. Okay? Now, the argument sort of goes like this. Right? They make the assumption of X. And I'm going to give you a bunch of things. They assume X. They do it here, they do it here, they do it in their rhetoric, they do it in their examples, they do it in their model, they do it in their criteria, okay? And all of these are the links to the critique, like what they do. You have to show, you can't just say, they assume X. Let's move on, right? You have to stipulate how. What is it they do that shows that they are making this assumption? Then you have to say why what they're saying, what with this assumption is false or evil. Right? Like the assumption my father would not let my sister go to college, even though she was very smart. Why? Oh, you're just going to have babies anyway. Who cares if you get a college education? Right? And I think that that assumption was pretty evil and false. Both. Right? So we assume, a lot of times when we assume things, they can be a serious problem. Then you have to say, okay, it doesn't have to be this way. You need to have an alternative. Right? Women should have equal rights to career, education, everything. Okay? So you'd say, you make this assumption that women don't need to be educated because they're just going to raise kids. Right? This is false and evil. Right? And it doesn't have to be that way. Three-step process in every critique. Our opponents do or say or advocate a specific idea, a way of viewing the world, specific kind of words. We think that this assumption is false or evil or both. Therefore, reject them because it doesn't have to be that way. Okay? Now, you can have different types of these arguments. And these arguments tend to be more philosophical. Right? The disadvantage is more mechanical. These arguments tend to be more philosophical and more organic because you're getting at the underlying assumptions. You can critique the framework they use to evaluate the controversy. The framework they use to evaluate the controversy. For example, they could be evaluating the idea of taking out Iranian nuclear facilities from a purely militaristic perspective. Right? They have these weapons, they're building these weapons are bad, we're going to use our weapons to destroy their weapons, we can do it, we have the technology, we have the ability, let's do it and it will succeed. Right? But that just assumes a militaristic perspective. Right? The framework that they're examining this with is purely militaristic. And when you use a militaristic framework to evaluate situations, you come up with a military response, and you probably only heighten the amount of conflict, especially military conflict, that's going to happen. Right? Let's say that their framework is that we're going to increase economic growth, we're going to massively increase economic growth is great, we need to have economic growth, vote for us. Okay? What's their assumption about economic growth? That's always good. Can you ever have enough of it?
Yep.
Well, I mean, from their perspective, probably the more the better, right? Okay? What are reasons why, as a framework for understanding human organization, that unlimited or always saying economic growth is good, it would be false or evil? Anybody?
For example, one Central African country has like the economic growth of 300% of nothing. And what's happening is just the inequalities are getting.
Well, if you make 3 cents and you get 9 cents, that's 300%, but that would still be better than 3 cents. Okay?
Economic growth can be dangerous to the environment.
Economic growth can be dangerous to the environment.
It causes
Right? Can you think of any examples of where economic growth in countries is endangered? Yeah, Malaysia.
Well, economic growth in the United States and industrialized.
Okay, fine, that's it. Okay, we're down with that. Anything besides environment?
It causes instabilities in the market.
Yeah, if economic growth is too fast, now why is that bad?
Because the market has specific to actually succeed.
So you can have too much of a good thing?
Well, if you look at why the Great Depression was caused by overproduction and
Yeah.
too much growth in investments.
Yeah, this is a wonderful thing for you to know about. You're walking in front of the camera, Brianna. One thing that's really good to know about if you have a chance is to research the cause of the Great Depression in the 1930s, because it was caused by overproduction and overinvestment, and then all of a sudden it overheated and broke down. Okay? Do you know that suicide rates are higher amongst richer people? Right? Right? That more economic growth leads to increased stress, which is the cause of countless numbers of diseases. Right? So this is just an example of where you can look at the framework. You might look at the way they view international relations, the nation-state system. Right? You might critique capitalism, economic growth. Anthropocentrism is a really good one. Anthropocentrism is the view that the only value nature has is to humans. Right? Nature is important for us to use and do our thing with. That's anthropocentrism. Where the reality is that we don't own nature, we're part of nature. Right? And so if we don't, and there's quite an excellent literature that says if we don't value plants and animals at their own level, that we will surely destroy the environment. Right? If we just look and make it human, then it will all look like, the wrong parts of Mumbai. Right? The whole world. Feminism, right? You can say that they take a male-oriented perspective, and it's bad. Militarism, development. High school kids did an awesome file about how we impose Western standards of development on other people, and they're doing okay, right? In fact, the average happiness in some of these less developed countries is higher than in most developed, I like to call them overdeveloped countries, a little overdeveloped like me, right? And so that when we impose our model of development on them, not only do we not make them happier, but we crush their forms of culture and forms of living in the process, right? So now everyone has McDonald's, and there's KFC and Tiananmen Square, and cultural imperialism is another one, right? Okay, I mean, other different cultures have different kinds of views on rights, liberties, social obligations, right? Studies of individuals in China and Korea indicate that people have a more communal centered, right? It's the group that's more important, the family, the community, the school, the state, right? But in Western societies, it's very much the individual is all, right? It's the individual rights, those are more important, those are the things that, and so a lot of times the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, for example, which the UN proposes, is very much a Western model of rights that's trying to impose on other countries. And that can be wrong. Okay, right? You think it would be bad for women to walk around with their breasts exposed in public?
No.
Not in some parts of the South Seas. But their navels need to be covered. Right? I mean, what is it about one part of the body that it always has to be covered? You're right? They don't cover the breast, they cover the navel. Alright? Because they don't want anyone to see it. But they can see other stuff. Now, who's to say that that's right and we're wrong, or vice versa? Right? It's a cultural issue. I think it's important to think about in terms of women's rights, for example. Right, about women's rights. To what extent are we trying to impose a Western view of feminism on Islamic societies, for example? And isn't that cultural imperialism? What gives the government team, the proposition team, the right to tell hundreds of millions of people that their way of life is wrong? Yes, Helen.
But if you say that we shouldn't judge other people because that's their belief, doesn't that sort of not allow you to judge the proposition team either, because it's their belief?
Oh no, we're just identifying, but we're identifying that, their proposal is so much more pernicious, and I'm just pointing out how pernicious it is, right? I'm not being, you're being cultural imperialistic. You're trying to impose cultural specificity on me. I said, no, that's my point is, if you want to believe that, fine, and that's cool, but I think that means you lose the debate because it's evil.
Okay, because I've just heard a lot of times when somebody says, who are we to judge that this is wrong or whatever, you start to get
Well, I would never say that in a debate because I'm here to say that the other side's wrong.
Alright.
So, yes.
Yeah, but with this treatment of women and women having to wear the headscarves and stuff, you can simply stand up and say, it's not written in the Quran, it's not your religion, you're being oppressive.
Well, so what if it's not written in the Quran?
If it's
It's their accepted. And, you know, I'll give you an example. Erdogan, the just re-elected leader of Turkey, right? His wife wears a headscarf. And you're not supposed to, Turkey's a very secular society, and you're not supposed to wear headscarf. So when she wore a headscarf to a big dinner with lots of government officials, it was a whole total controversy. Because she's not supposed to wear that. Well, I mean, if she wants to, she can. So, I mean, it kind of works both ways, right? Women shouldn't be forced to wear headscarves, or they should be forced to wear headscarves, or... I mean, my Western individual character would say that, you know, every individual should decide for themselves what to wear. But in a collective society, where they say, no, we want to make sure that, and the Islamic argument is that women need to be covered so that men don't do terrible things. Right? So that men don't get excited by the vision of women's bodies and do terrible things. That's their argument. It's not that they don't have an argument. Yes, we repress women and we like it. That's not what they're saying. They're saying it's needed to have a healthy community. And so I think you just need to be aware of a lot of this stuff that's imposed. If nothing else, I think you can say that human rights are not necessarily universal. You can't have one standard for rights, one size fits all when you have hundreds of cultures, right? And you should be aware when the government team's prop team's trying to do that. Okay? You can also have morality or value or philosophical critiques. Right? You can explore, you know, they use immoral means to get good ends, or they use good means to get bad ends, the whole means-ends contradiction, right? Which is what, you know, war is often about. Often proposals will hurt the least privileged to benefit the most privileged. Right? Any strict application of capitalist theory generally means that some people end up in bad shape, and other people prosper and get much richer. Some philosophers argue that you should never use people as means. You should never use people as means. Okay? It's like, oh, it's okay for me to use you to get my objectives. Right? You should want to do it on your own, not, you know, my manipulating you. Okay, so, and if you're studying philosophy, I think you can apply that. Finally, I just want to talk about performance critiques. Performance critiques. And that's where people say things that are a problem. Generally, this is, you can critique the forms of speech that people use. Now, Boyana loves this one, so that's why I keep telling people about it, although nobody likes to use it. If they use speech that is sexist, racist, xenophobic, or violent, you should criticize them for that. What if they use language like, we're going to crush this, we're going to slaughter this, we're murdering the opposition team on this argument, right? The gratuitous use of violent language. And the theory behind this is that language creates reality. That language creates reality. And if you're constantly using language that uses violent metaphors, then that makes violence more likely. I'm sure you've heard people make sexist comments, right, about women, and then when you ask them, they go, oh, well, I didn't mean anything by it. Right? What are you doing? Does it mean your speech doesn't mean anything? Is that what you're saying? Right? But language creates reality. And it very much does. And the way we begin to understand the world is often through language. And so this is a very real thing they're doing. And I think there's a lot of good argument to say this is not the better job of debating. Right? Using sexist speech, using heterosexist speech. Oh, that argument's so gay. Right? You've heard that? Or disableist. Like it's very popular in America to say an argument's bad, it's lame. Okay, you all hip with what lame means? It means your leg's bad and you can't walk well. Right? I mean, my debaters were saying that all the time, and I said, well, you know, here's this guy on our debate team who has a bad leg, and he limps really badly, so you're saying that, right? Every time you say that, that's kind of an insult towards him. Okay? So you could say, they use bad speech. Language creates reality, right? It's affecting all of us here and in their discussion of their policies. And it's not the better job of debating, it's another reason to reject them. Okay? So what we want to do is, all these people from the British Isles who have a sexist language problem, we would like to be able to use that against them. But who knows if we can. Okay? So, two kinds of arguments. Bad things happen when we do whatever the government proposition is suggesting, and that their assumptions are false, evil, or both. Right? And these will supply lots of additional arguments. You're already using some of these when you say, oh, well, if we, have gay marriage, then children will be teased. And you're already saying this. Right? But I think it helps you understand it in a bit more of a structured way. And also how to answer them. Right? It's happening anyway. We're not next to the brink, so the wind has to blow 1,000 miles an hour. There are pillows down here, not sharp rocks. Right? That's their big deal. Okay. Thank you.